Hello and welcome back to part 3 of the Keeping Safety Simple series. Man, that is a tough one to say. Maybe I'll do it with a list. What about Keeping Safety Simple series? With Shayne Connolly. There you go. Anyway, this episode is the third part. So it's called Moving Forward After an Incident. The second part was called Responding to Incidents Correctly. And in the first episode, it was titled Getting the Right Safety Systems in Place. So guys, please make sure that you go and check out those other two before you dive into this one. It will probably make a lot more sense to you if you do. If you have any questions or if you want anything followed up on specifically, by all means, post some comments wherever you see this come through. If you're listening to this on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, whatever, please leave us some comments. And if you can, leave us a review. That would be much appreciated. Shayne is also part of the Facebook community. So if you want to continue that conversation, probably the best place to do it is over at the SiteShed closed group, which you can apply to join, and you will be let in by the lovely Talia. Anyway, that's all. Let's jump into this episode. This concludes that series, so I hope you like it, and if you did enjoy it and you got something out of it, please send it on to somebody else that might benefit. That is all in the spirit of helping each other. Okay, let's jump in. The SiteShed podcast is made possible because of Tradie Web Guys, creators of beautiful websites designed specifically for tradies and contractors. If you're tired of dealing with web designers that have no idea about your industry, then head across to tradiewebguys.com.au and reach out. Like many companies from all over the place, you'll be very glad you did.
Giving tradies and contractors around the globe the tools to run a modern business. You're listening to Toolbox Talks from the SiteShed. Now here's your host, Matt Jones.
Hello listeners, welcome back to Toolbox Talks on the SiteShed podcast. My name is Matt Jones. I am your host and facilitator, and today I am joined by my co-host for this series, which we have called Keeping Safety Simple. It's Mr. Shayne Connolly. Shayne, welcome back.
Thanks for having me again, Matt.
Shayne is from Keep It Simple Safety, and they do all things occupational health and safety, work health and safety related for tradies and the likes of. This series has been great so far. We've talked about, in the first episode, getting the right safety procedures in place. In the previous episode, we were talking about how to respond to incidents that might occur in your day-to-day running of your business. And in this episode, we're talking about moving forward after the incident. So like always, guys, if you haven't heard the previous episodes, you probably want to go check them out because we will refer back to them. And we do structure these in a way that the episode we're recording will lead into the previous in a series. Shayne, thank you for joining us once again. This is the third and final wrap-up episode. And we're talking about, I suppose, moving forward after an incident. And this is really, I suppose, stemmed on from, that scenario where, some people don't have the right ducks in line to begin with, and as a result, they end up basically forced in their foreclosure.
So, yeah, moving forward from an incident, depending on how serious it is too, can be the make or break. And there are a few reasons for that. One, the first main reason, I guess, is that it's not something that people come across every day. This is not going to happen in your business on a regular basis. Well, I certainly hope it's not happening on a regular basis.
Right.
So it's one of those things that pops up and people just don't know what they're meant to do. So that's one of the big things. And it also can be, if you're not informed and you don't understand what you're meant to do, then things can kind of get out of hand without you even knowing it's happening. Mm. The injury can drag on for a long time. It can affect your premiums and all sorts of different things. And if you're not proactive, then all of a sudden 6 months can have gone by and it's cost you money and time, and now it becomes a real problem because it can't be undone easily. So
I normally ask at this point, who we're directing this talk towards, but I suppose it's kind of, it could be a number of people really. Like we could be talking about, moving forward after an incident. You could be referring to the person that was injured. You could be referring to the organisation. You could be referring to physical damage, psychological damage, property damage. Like there's a number of different things we could, I suppose, skew off into in this episode. Maybe I suppose we should let's talk about the business as such. So, how does the business move forward? But I wouldn't mind talking about, in in the wake of a couple of podcasts that I've just recorded only this week, actually, in the lead up to Tradies National Health Month, where I was speaking with some guys that were heavily in the mental health space, and they were talking about some of the issues that can arise from injury, and actually a lot of mental issues that arise from injury, and I'm curious from your point of view, someone who actually works in this space a lot, what are some of the, I suppose, best ways that companies can move forward in managing people that have been through, some sort of ordeal?
Well, I'll just start with the keyword proactive. You have to be on the front foot. You can't wait for problems to present themselves. So, and that's proactive in a lot of ways. So after somebody's injured, they go to the doctor gives them a certificate and says, they need this treatment or they need to go and see this specialist. They've got this much time off work. And then that gets lodged with your insurance company, and so the process begins. If you are disengaged from that process and you just let it wander along by itself, that's when things can go wrong for the business, for that person, for their mental health. If you're proactive and you're on the front foot and you talk to the insurance company, you talk to the doctor, you talk to the person who was injured, and you're working towards some solution that works for everybody, then that's when you get the best outcome. So it's not that you have to know what to do necessarily, it's just that you have to get involved in the process.
So in the first episode, we were talking about getting the right safety systems in place. I'm curious. So in a scenario where somebody has injured themselves at work, which is going to lead to, potentially anyway, maybe a debilitating injury. It might be like a mental injury that's come as a result of, something that they've incurred at work. Are there systems and policies that you should put in place that can manage scenarios like that? For example, counselling and, all that kind of stuff.
So in its basic sense, you want to have an injury and injury management and return to work policy and procedure.
Right.
And that just kind of outlines that, the basics of what you'll do. You can't have a procedure that's all encompassing because you don't know what might happen, but you can have a procedure that says, we'll follow it up, we'll do this, we'll follow through with the employee, we'll try to find them work, we'll try to help them get back to work. If we can't get down that path, then we'll try to help them into another position. So you sort of outline what you hope to be able to do in that procedure. But it's very important that you have that procedure in the first place.
It raises a good point, though, doesn't it? I mean, if you've got somebody that you've employed to do a certain task within your organisation, they get injured, they get rehabilitated, they come back to work, but they can't do that task again, then what sort of position does that put you as a business owner into? Like if you've hired that person to do something and they can't do it anymore?
Well, that depends on how organised and proactive you are. So if that happens after 6 months and no work on your behalf or no proactive work, then it can leave you in a really awkward position because if you don't have procedures to base your process on, then you don't have anything that says if we don't have a position for you, we may move to, reposition you or help you find another job or whatever it might be. If you don't have that, then you do get stuck. It is not easy to, I don't want to use the word dismiss because you're not dismissing somebody. You're moving them on because you can't, if you're a 3-person operation that doesn't have any office,
right, there
is no position for somebody who can't climb a ladder. So, and that's okay. If that's your business, that's okay. There are lots of businesses that have those things happen and you're not stuck with that person. But things get ugly when you don't get proactive. So if you're not talking to that employee, if you're not talking to the insurer and the doctor and trying to and explaining your business and where your business is at and what things can happen there, then especially their mental health for the person who's been injured, if they feel like it's going to be hard or that they're not welcome back in the business or you're not there supporting them, then, the first thing that they generally do is they find a lawyer. And that's not where you want to go. You want to, being proactive means getting ahead of those things, talking to that person. If they are interested in something else and you can't possibly get them back into the business, if they've hurt their back and need a office-based job, then there's lots of options that are in front of you, from retraining them to, helping them to, maybe even talking to people in business and trying to help them, move forward. There's lots of ways you can be proactive. There's not a prescription for it.
Are there so saying that if you're in that scenario with an employee who can't necessarily do the work that you've originally employed them to do, is there any sort of, if you have to retrain them into a certain task, is there any funding or anything available to companies to help them through that period where they're basically employing someone who's being retrained and doesn't really know what they're doing?
There can be. There are some. There's always different funds available for training. It's just a matter of whether, I guess the way when I used to work for a corporate business, the way we would try to do it is, if they weren't at work anyway, then we would try to incorporate that training in that time, especially if it was something that they could do that didn't require them to, lift or move or whatever it was they were restricted on. So again, it's just being smart about it. But what you'll find is, if you have those conversations with the doctor and your insurer and the person who was injured, if you're all on the same page and you're all working towards the same outcome, then it just gets a lot easier. The worse that communication gets, the worse the outcome is. And then you do really start talking about things, the mental health issues that people can have. If you've been off work for 6 months, then they can get depressed, stress can get involved. And you know what? Those mental illnesses that affect people's health are far more serious than, a knee reconstruction or something like that. They're much harder to recover from. So being, the most important thing you can do is talk to the person and make them feel like you care about what happens to them.
Yeah, we were talking about this actually the other day when I was recording that series, and it's interesting, isn't it? Like if you damage yourself, you break an arm or whatever, the recovery is noticeable. Like, it's tangible. You can see it, you can feel it, it's
measurable.
It's measurable, exactly. However, in the mental capacity, it's a lot harder to gauge improvement. Yep. And it can be.
Well, it's a place you don't want to go.
Right.
If you can avoid it, then that's what you should do.
Yeah. We interrupt this podcast today to talk to you very quickly about Tradie Web Guy's content creation program. That program has been designed specifically for trade-based organizations as a way that you guys, as trade business owners, can start creating content that enables you to engage better with your customers and your potential customers. It will enable you to build trust and build rapport, because what you're doing is you're investing in educating them. Biggest problem that we see with our customers today is that they're not regularly updating their websites. And that's a problem, because first of all, the search engines are looking for that. And second of all, potential customers are also looking for it. Tradie Web Guy's content creation program has been specifically designed to help you get regular, relevant content on your website consistently every month. We know that it's hard when you're out there on the tools, and we know that sometimes you don't always have the time to be able to do these things yourself. So we're taking it off your hands for you. It's a service that we're offering for you guys. We want to make sure that you're getting this done, because we know how important it is. Anyway, head across to tradiewebguys.com.au/content, fill in the form, and one of our representatives will come back to you.
If you've got good systems in place, and if you get out on the front foot and you manage the situation well, and this is a good time, if you do have resources like us to call on when these things happen, that's the time to call on them, so that they're telling you what to do. Make sure they've filled this paperwork out properly. Make sure that this is in place. Make sure that you have regular meetings with them. Make sure that the medical people involved are aware of what kind of job they do. You would be shocked how many doctors don't even ask what they do as a profession.
Yeah.
So I've had medical certificates come back and say, this person can't lift more than 5 kilos and can't climb a ladder. and they're a plumber or a builder or whatever. And you're like, well, then you're saying they can't work.
Yeah.
Oh, and so one of the things you're allowed to do in this situation is you are allowed to talk to the doctor. So because a lot of times doctors make decisions based on poor information. So if you go with the person to the doctor, listen to what the doctor has to say, and explain your position and say, well, this is what we do as a business. I don't have light duties like you're thinking of light duties. Is there any other way that we can get around this, Because there are more than one way to skin a cat. So, but you won't find those things if you're not proactive, if you don't ask questions. So, because your aim should always be to get them back to work.
Right.
If they're back to 100% health, then back to work is the best place to be.
Yeah.
So if you go forward with that as your aim, it's hard to go wrong.
Is there going back to the example that I mentioned in a previous podcast of one of my friends works for a big company, and one of the roofers is a builder, but one of the roofers on the site jumped the fence over after work and scaled up onto the roof to get his phone, then left up there, fell, killed himself. There must be a lot, like when we're talking about moving forward after an incident, like I can imagine if you're the site foreman, on that job, like that would be bit of an emotional roller coaster as well.
Yeah, I don't know. Fortunately for me, working on large sites, I've never had to make that phone call, which, I thank my lucky stars. I know people who have never really recovered from that, especially when it's somebody who's under your responsibility, because you'll just be forever asking yourself why, or what if I'd done this, or what if I'd done that. So, and those sort of people need counselling. You don't resolve that yourself.
Yeah, because as important it is to rehabilitate people that have been injured, it's like equally as important to rehabilitate people that are in situations like that.
And funnily enough, well, not funny really, but really serious incidents, sometimes the person who's injured is the one who comes out of it the best. Yeah. Because they're just dealing with it. And the other people who saw it happen and saw them almost die.
They're more traumatised than
they are seriously traumatised. So, and they sometimes struggle more than the person who was actually injured. So on that note, that's something you should look for in your business. If there was people standing there watching this guy's hand get cut off, they're going to need support. Whether they're a big burly bloke who says, no, I'm fine, they're going to you need to offer support to them in one way or another.
And see, that's another conversation, isn't it? Like we were talking about this the other day, how there's such a mentality around, being the macho sort of bravado kind of, I'm fine, she'll be right sort of dude, which at the end of the day could be completely bullshit. So, you got to, as a business owner, I feel like you kind of need to be discerning in those scenarios as well, and maybe to the point where you don't take no for an answer. It's not like, well, okay, I'm not giving you the option here. Like, you need to go see this guy. Like put them through the program.
Yeah, and that's something that certainly large companies will do that. If you're involved in that kind of incident, they will force you to go and see a counsellor.
Right.
You don't have to continue, but they are discharging their duty by saying, no, you have to attend some counselling. So whether or not you do that as a small business is kind of a personal decision, and it does depend too how well you know your staff. Generally, small businesses tend to know their staff pretty well. So if the big gruff guy is really a pussycat. So, and if that's the case, then he's going to need help, So, whether and sometimes you need to go and talk to their family, go and talk to their wife or their partner, and say, look, this is here if you need it. Call me, give them your number. All of that sort of support is what prevents things from going pear-shaped.
So moving forward from a business perspective, after there's an incident, say, let's call it a semi-serious incident, obviously you've got, staff that are, they might have seen it, they might be, you've got people that are injured, you might have people that are, now a bit terrified about certain things that are happening in the organisation. Like, obviously, the business itself has to manage all of that stuff, and then they've also got to, move forward and set a plan and set an agenda looking forward. Does that agenda typically look like, okay, well, we need to go back to the drawing board and make sure that, all of our systems are in place and all of our procedures are right and we're fully compliant as a starting point, and then we need to, obviously, while we're doing that, we've obviously got to take care of, those that have been injured or those that have been affected within this incident. And then, I mean, then you kind of got to map out another, the roadmap, don't you? And you got to try and get your staff to buy into that, which, I don't know, maybe that's tricky when they're not in that frame of mind.
Well, sometimes it's the best time to get people on board because...
Right, take their mind off it.
Well, they've seen that it really does happen. One of the hardest things to talk to people about is safety, because if they haven't seen someone get hurt, then it's not real. So often, when I've done toolbox talks and presentations for companies before, you can tell the people who have seen something bad because they are listening intently to what you're saying, because they believe in safety,
right? Because
they've seen what happens if you don't do it right. So, and that's one of those things, there's a lot of lessons in life that you can only learn in real time. And unfortunately, it's like trying to get teenagers to drive safely. I'm 10 foot tall and bulletproof. I'll be fine. Thank you. And so after an incident is the best time to get people to buy into, there's a reason why we do everything the way we do it. And there's a reason why we want your input into that process. And there's a reason why we have all of these systems and procedures. So it is you don't obviously you're not trying to take advantage of it, but it is the time to talk about it and make sure
while it's out there.
Yes, that's right, because it's real for everybody then.
That's a good point.
It is not just something that you're trying to imagine might happen.
I know when we went through, TAFE and all that kind of stuff, there was a lot of talk about. I mean, I don't know if you call it a scare tactic or whatever, but they'd like to sort of bring up the gory videos of things that have happened and all that kind of stuff on site. I'm not sure if they do that anymore, but that was always, this is what could happen to you if you fall off a roof, and it's got people being, stabbed by a Rio sticking out of the ground and all that kind of stuff.
The shock and awe tactics.
The shock and awe tactic. Yeah.
It just doesn't work though, really. Well, I shouldn't say that. It does work for some people, but it's a very small percentage.
It's probably less graphic than half the video games these kids are playing anyway.
Well, and half the stuff that'll come up in your YouTube feed, if you're on any of those groups, there's all sorts of stuff that people see these days. So we're a bit desensitized to that. And the truth is that just like, if you drive past a funeral procession, it means nothing to you unless you know the person in it.
Yeah. And
so safety is very much the same for people. It doesn't mean anything unless you are actually part of it. So, I think at the end of the day, you've got to, as I said before, you've got to show people that you really care as a boss. It is really actually important to you that they go home safe at the end of the day, and that if something does go wrong, you're going to do everything in your power to try and make sure that it's put right.
Yeah.
Because that message does mean something to people. People might joke about it, and I've seen plenty of people make jokes about those kind of things, but it's really important, and it can really mean the difference between getting through something like this or not getting through it.
So I suppose getting to wrapping up this episode and this series, to maybe a bit of a framework for moving forward after an incident, and maybe you can bounce back and forth with me on this one. So obviously, first of all, you want to make sure that everyone who's been affected is being looked after and they're seeking the treatment that they deserve.
Yeah, get on the front foot. Make sure that find out everybody who's been involved, and that may even go to extended, to wives and partners and stuff like that, because they will see the other side of the equation. So
that's a good point. We didn't really touch on that, did we?
No, that's a whole other topic of its own, really. So, but yeah, you've reach as far as you can.
Secondly, I suppose, don't sweep it under the rug. Like, have the conversation at work while it's fresh and everyone knows what's happened, and get it out there and address it right there and then.
Use it as a learning moment. So that's people sometimes feel a bit sensitive about those things, but
yes.
That's what you should do. If someone falls off a ladder and breaks a leg, use that as a learning moment, because you won't get many opportunities to learn from those sort of things.
Yeah, exactly. And then I suppose you'd need to, strategize moving forward from a business point of view, in the sense of, okay, well, that's an incident, it's been done, but we've got to keep going. So we need to map out our plan and keep moving forward. Otherwise, we're dead in the water.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like anything else that you have to recover from. You've got to plan for it and then put that plan into motion, and then follow up to make sure that whether that involved getting new ladders, or whether that involved upgrading something, or whether it was just training, whatever the outcome is from your investigation that, leads you to think that something went wrong, that's what you need to follow through. And as always, document everything, keep good documents.
So to wrap up the series, really, like in the first episode when we were talking about getting the right safety systems in place, that's all about making sure that you've done your due diligence, you've documented the right procedures, the right systems, you've toolboxed your staff, they understand how to handle scenarios, everything's written down, everyone's sort of on the same page when it comes to that, right?
Yeah, you've given your business a framework to operate inside of, because that's what your policies and procedures are. It's like what do I do when?
It's step by step.
That's right.
And then in the second episode, we were talking about responding to incidents correctly. So that was all about, making sure that if, something unfortunately does happen on site, that the person who's there, who's responsible, is attending to that in the right manner. They're fulfilling all the right obligations in the sense of, doing the site assessments and investigating right and, documenting, taking photos, all that kind of thing.
Yeah. Make sure you look after the person, then look after the scene, and then investigate what's happened.
And then obviously in this episode, we've wrapped it up with, just making sure that everyone's on the right page moving forward and that everything's in order. So I think we've pretty much closed it off. What do you reckon?
Yeah, look, I guess the only thing I would add, as a general note about incidents and mental health in general, I guess, is that, it is something that as much as people don't like to talk about it, it really is something that your mental state of mind when you go to work is one of your protective measures. So if you're not in your right mental state when you go to work, you're putting yourself and other people at risk. So, but if you can't talk about that as a business, if you can't go to your boss and talk to that person about it, then it's hard to get past it. So, it's something that should be addressed in every business, whether you do it in a group or whether you do it individually, and just let people know that you're there if they need help, if they need anything. It's really important.
Yeah, no, brilliant. I love it. All right, mate. Well, thank you very much for your time. For the listeners out there, that's Shayne Connolly from Keep It Simple Safety. The website's keepitsimplesafety.com.au. Head across there where you can take part in the free online WHS assessment. Shayne, I'll put some links to the website and all that kind of stuff within the show notes for these episodes. And you are going to also leave behind something that the guys can get hold of as a bit of ready material, a bit of a value add, so they can learn a little bit more about how to do this stuff correctly. Is that right? That's
correct. We'll give you a bit of a how-to guide to set up your own system if you've got the time, or obviously you can get someone else to do it for you like us.
And I know you've been working on an ebook. I've had the privilege of proofreading it on a recent flight, which was wonderful. Look forward to that, listeners.
Yes, it's a much more detailed version of that how-to guide. So I'm hoping to have that out in maybe by the time this podcast comes to air.
There you go.
We'll see. It really depends on how much time I have on my hands. It's not something that I have tons of time to complete yet. Yeah, no, I understand. I completely relate to that. But anyway, that's cool. All right. Well, thanks again, mate. And we're going to wrap this one up now. But listeners, if you've got any questions regarding occupational health and safety or work health safety, by all means, please hit us up with the questions. Shayne is a member of the community, so you can head across there and ask those questions and he'll get them answered for you. Otherwise, you can... wherever you see this podcast come across, whether that's through your social media channels or in one of our emails, you can always reply or post a comment wherever you see it. So, Shayne, thanks again for your time, and I think that is a wrap. Thank you for listening to another episode of Toolbox Talks. If you're liking what you hear, then you can head across to thesiteshed.com where you can join our community by signing up to our Toolbox Talks. You'll get sent a weekly notification, which is basically a highlight of everything that we've spoken about during that week, along with any other industry news that may be relevant or specific to the trades. If you're enjoying the show, you can head across to iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, where you can leave us a review. That would be fantastic, and all the reviews get read out in the show. Likewise, if you have any friends or colleagues that you think would benefit from the show and the episodes that we create, then please go ahead and share it with them.